This shouldn't work. Rust is damage. Once metal starts rusting, it's already failing, breaking down, getting weaker, slowly turning into dust. That's the rule. You either remove it or replace the metal completely. So how can a cheap liquid do the opposite? Not remove rust, but actually turn it into protection? Because that sounds wrong. Rust is the problem, not the solution. And yet, when you apply this correctly, something strange happens. The surface changes, not just visually, but structurally. The weak, flaky rust turns into something darker, harder, more stable, almost like a shield. So what's really going on here? Because if this is true, it completely changes how you think about rust. Instead of fighting it, you're using it. But before that, let's test it. Same metal, same rust, same starting condition, no cleaning, no sanding, nothing removed, because that's how most people try this. They see rust and immediately try to get rid of it. But this method doesn't start that way. So we take a piece of rusted metal, dry, flaky, clearly damaged, and we leave it exactly like that. Now on one side, we do what most people normally do. Scrape it, clean it, try to expose fresh metal. On the other side, we do something different. We leave the rust untouched and apply the liquid directly on top. At first, nothing looks impressive. No instant transformation, no dramatic reaction, just a wet surface. And this is where most people quit, because they expect instant results. Like paint, like coating, something visible right away. But this doesn't work like that. It's slower, quiet, almost invisible at the beginning. So we wait, because something is happening, even if you can't see it yet. Minutes pass, then more time. The surface starts to darken, slightly at first, then more evenly. The bright orange rust begins to disappear, not by falling off, but by changing. And this is where it gets interesting, because the texture changes too. What was flaky starts to feel solid, less brittle, more compact. And if you compare both sides now, the difference is clear. The cleaned side, still exposed, still vulnerable. The treated side, darker, more stable, less reactive. So clearly, something is happening here, but it's not coating the surface. It's not covering the rust. It's doing something else. Something deeper. Because if you scratch it, you don't reveal fresh rust underneath. You reveal the same dark layer. Which means the rust itself has changed. And that shouldn't be possible. Because rust is already the end stage. The damage is done. So how can a simple liquid reverse that? Or at least turn it into something useful? Because once you understand that, this stops looking like a hack and starts looking like chemistry. But here's where most people get it wrong. They see this effect and think any liquid will do the same thing. That's not true. Because most liquids do absolutely nothing. Or worse, they trap moisture and make rust spread faster. So the real question is, what is this liquid actually doing? And why does it only work under specific conditions? Because without that understanding, you'll try this and get completely different results. And that's exactly why most people think this doesn't work. So what's really happening on that surface? And why does that small change turn rust into protection? So what is this liquid actually doing? Because it's not removing rust. It's not cleaning it. And it's definitely not just covering it, it's transforming it. Chemically. And that's the key difference most people miss. Because rust is a form of iron oxide. Unstable, flaky, reactive. That's why it keeps spreading. That's why it weakens metal. But when you apply the right liquid, something changes at the molecular level. The unstable rust gets converted into a more stable compound, a darker layer, much less reactive, and much harder. This process is called conversion, not removal. And that's why the rust doesn't disappear. It becomes something else, something that actually protects the metal underneath. Now think about that. Instead of fighting rust, you're turning it into a barrier, a shield. But here's the part most people completely ignore. This only works if the rust is prepared correctly. And this is where almost everyone fails, because they either over-clean it or don't clean it at all. If you remove all the rust, there's nothing to convert. The liquid has nothing to react with. So it does almost nothing. But if you leave thick, loose, flaky rust, the liquid can't penetrate properly. It only reacts with the surface, and everything underneath stays weak, so you end up with a layer that looks good, but fails over time. That's why balance is critical. You need to remove loose rust, but keep the bonded layer, the part that's still attached to the metal. That's what gets converted. That's what becomes protective. Now go back to the test. The side we cleaned too much? No reaction, just bare metal. The side we left completely rough, uneven result, weak underneath. But the side with controlled preparation? That's where it works. That's where the transformation happens properly. And this is why most people think this method is fake, because they skip this step, or do it wrong, and get inconsistent results. Now here's something even more important. Time. This process is not instant. It continues after application. As long as the surface is reacting, the conversion is happening. That's why the color deepens over time. That's why the surface gets harder. But if you interrupt this process, or expose it too early, you weaken the result. And that leads to another common mistake. People apply the liquid, see the dark color, and think it's done. Then they expose it to moisture, or paint over it too quickly. And the protection fails, because the reaction wasn't complete. So patience matters. Let it fully react. Let the surface stabilize. Only then does it become durable. Now combine everything. Correct rust level, proper preparation, right application, enough time, and suddenly this cheap liquid becomes powerful, not by removing rust, but by controlling it, transforming it, stabilizing it. But there's still one more mistake, and it's the one that completely ruins everything, even if you do all of this correctly. Because this final step determines whether the protection lasts or fails completely. And this is where most people lose the long-term benefit. So what's the final mistake? The one that ruins everything? Sealing. This is where most people think they're doing the right thing, but actually destroy the result. Because after the surface turns dark, after the rust is converted, they immediately paint over it, or seal it completely. And that sounds logical. Protect it, right? But here's the problem. If the reaction isn't fully complete, you trap moisture inside, and trapped moisture starts the process all over again from the inside. So everything looks fine on the surface, but underneath, rust keeps spreading slowly, quietly, until it fails again. And that's why people say, this doesn't last, when in reality, they stopped the process too early. Now here's the correct way. After applying the liquid, you let it fully react. Completely dry, completely stabilize. Only then, you seal it, and when you do that properly, now you're not trapping moisture, you're locking in protection. That's the difference. Now go back to everything. You didn't remove the rust. You controlled it. You didn't hide the damage. You transformed it. And with the final step done right, you actually stop it from coming back. Not temporarily, but long-term. And that's what makes this powerful, because most people think rust means the end. Replace the metal, throw it away, start over. But in reality, with the right method, you can extend its life, using something simple, cheap, and almost ignored. Now think about that. A problem people constantly fight, solved by understanding it better. Not by force, but by control. And once you see it work, you don't look at rust the same way again. If this made you rethink how rust actually works, then you're going to like what's coming next, because there are a lot of simple things like this that look useless but completely change how things behave. So if you don't want to miss those, hit subscribe. If you've ever tried something like this before, or seen it fail, drop a comment. I want to know what happened, because small details change everything here.